Hey everybody, I'm Scott, and I want to talk to you today about climate change. Before I even get into that, I want to acknowledge the land that I belong to, and it's right here on the Grand River watershed. It's a beautiful place. I live here as a settler on the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinootan peoples. And you know, your history and mine is intertwined with the history of these Indigenous peoples, right up to today in 2020.
Oh, 2020. I think it's safe to say that none of us ever imagined that this year would look like this. We're definitely going to tell our grandchildren about 2020. We'll tell them about how we went to school wearing masks, wondering when the second wave of the virus would finally peak. We'll also likely tell them about how statues of our first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, were put away as protests about systemic racism happened around the world and right here in our region. There's a lot going on right now, and this is a confusing, maybe even a little frightening time to be growing up. And I didn't even start talking about climate change yet. That's still a thing, even in the middle of everything else that's happening.
I think about climate change a lot. I think about how it's going to impact my kids and my grandkids. Maybe you think about it a lot too. Right now I'm doing a PhD here at the University of Waterloo, and my reading and writing and research is focused on climate change, what we can do about it here in this community and around the world.
I often ask myself, how did we get into this mess? And how do we get out? That's a long story. If we go back to the very beginning of the story, we hear the God of the Bible call creation good repeatedly. Check Genesis chapter 1, verses 10, 12, 18, and 25 if you want to fact check me on this. God made humans part of creation, and they saw that the earth was good. God told those humans, "This is all yours as a gift. I've given it to you so that you can prosper, and I'm counting on you to protect it." Humans prospered, but sadly, they seem to lose the protect plotline in God's creation story. Over the last few centuries, a new story has been written by humans, a story of endless economic growth, powered by fossil fuels. It's a tale of great wealth, progress, and development, but there have been some very scary plot twists in this story. Our overdependence on fossil fuels has created unbreathable air in many cities, contributed to droughts and forest fires, unstable weather and increased hurricanes, melting permafrost and glaciers, and other forms of environmental destruction. And all this chaos is endorsed by some of the world's most powerful people. The rest of us might feel like all we can do is watch it all unfold. We might feel like the audience at a very scary movie. I know I feel like that sometimes, sitting on the edge of my seat, holding my breath and wondering when the next jump scare is coming. Like, are we at the cusp of a self-reinforcing feedback in the carbon cycle that triggers a cascading set of tipping points and plunges the Earth into an irreversible hothouse climate state? Seriously though, this is scary stuff, and it can feel like it's all beyond our control. We don't have to be the audience, paralyzed by fear. We can be authors, writing new stories with our lives, and reminding others of their connection to creation. You don't have to be a famous Swedish teen with a solar sailboat and 4 million Twitter followers to challenge the fairy tale. We're all connected to God's creation love story from the moment we're born, and our every breath has an impact on that story. Ojibwe author Richard Wagamese put it more poetically than I can. He said, "From our first breath, we are in relationship. With that indrawn draft of air, we become joined to everything that ever was and ever will be. Our breath commingles with all breath, and we are part of everything. That's the simple fact of things. We are born in a state of relationship."
This connection means that our lives have an impact on creation, your life and my life. I find this both exhilarating and terrifying. You're in high school now, and it's a time when you're thinking about the vision for your life. There's never been a time quite like this to write a life story, when the world is at a crossroads of danger and opportunity. And now, I invite you to consider these two big questions while you think about the vision for your life story.
How can we write a life story that reflects and reinforces a connection to creation? How can we use our lives to build a more sustainable foundation for the future, for our family, our community, and our planet?
Now, I didn't think it'd be fair to ask you two questions that big and expect you to figure them out all on your own. So I approached some folks who've done some thinking about those questions already, and I asked them how they integrate care for creation and climate action into their own life stories.
Hi, my name is Jubilee, and I'm a second-year university student at the Canadian Mennonite University, and I'm studying a Bachelor of Arts degree.
I am involved with a range of different pursuits. One of them is as a PhD student in the community psychology program at Wilfrid Laurier University here in Waterloo.
Wikwem Kong Menado Menacing Donjiba. Ujiboyang Shabe Quay, meanwhile, Nijo Madewan in Del. Peterborough Megwa in Del. Economagazit in Del. So, hello, my name is Marianne Caviosi, and I'm Ujiboyang Shabe from Wikwemacong unceded territory.
Hi, my name is Jordan Dolphin. I own a business in downtown Kitchener called Legacy Greens. We are a fresh food grocery store that focuses on produce, and then we also sell other local foods.
Hi there, my name is Justin Eisinga, and I am a master's student at Canadian Mennonite University, which is in Winnipeg, Treaty 1 territory. I am here at CMU studying theology and the ways that our relationship with creation can be integrated into the life of the church.
So what I was pondering about how can you write a life story that reflects and reinforces connection to creation. One of the important things to understand, at least from our perspective, Indigenous people's perspective, is that we've always been connected to creation. We've always felt and known through our own teachings that the smallest beings in creation are our relatives. From the bee to the cricket, to the pollinators, frogs, salamanders, the birds, the grasses, the medicines, the four-legged, the deer, moose, bear, all of those. And those are just a few, but they're all related to us. So we say all our relations. You might hear that in our presentations, is that everything is connected. And the human, the two-legged, were the last beings to be put in creation. So we're the least important. And we have to, when we think about that, we recognize that everything in creation is there for the rest of creation. And so we honor all of those beings. And we understand that all of creation has spirit. Everything has life. And they're dependent on each other. We're dependent on creation. If there's no more creation, we're done. If there's no more water, we're done. And so we thank creation. There's three words that I'll be talking about at another time. It's respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. We have to respect creation. We have to give back instead of taking from her. And we have to feel a sense of responsibility for those generations to come. It's not just us. And so when you write your story, you have to say, how did I connect with creation? Well, the answer is go out to creation. Go and sit on the earth. You know, we have one day of the year, Earth Day, one day to honor the earth. Meanwhile, she gives us everything 364 days of the year.
When I was thinking about this question, I thought about how it can be really easy to think these days about our connection to creation as one that is purely a part of a social movement that we see on social media and in the news. We hear about climate change being an issue that we have to fight for, and it becomes just a social movement. We need to be like good activists, and I think all of that is very true. But I think it's important that our activism is born out of a love for the places where we live. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. We can't keep going and fighting and tweeting and posting on Facebook without having a love for the earth and for places. And so I think when I think about that, I think about the question of like, how do we come to love somebody or something? And it's usually because we spend time with a person, or we are talking to them. We're in relationship with places or with things, And so I think we have to ask ourselves the questions of, where are the places that I love, and how can I love them more? And I think that will become a way for us to live out a story that's connected to the created world around us. And when you start paying attention, you recognize that maybe the world is charged with God's love. And I think more and more the work that we need to do in our lives is to recognize the sacred places and tell them apart from the desecrated places, and recognize that maybe even in those places that we might call desecrated, which means, neglected or ugly, or those places that we might not even think there's life. Maybe there's ways that we can bring life back there.
So I think that there are two ways that I'm working to write a life story that reflects and reinforces a connection to creation. The first is coming to view myself not as separate from creation, but as a relational part of it. I've learned from reading Indigenous authors that there's great power in learning the names of living things, of creation, and in sharing those names with other people. Because when we know the name of a plant or ecosystem or animal, we can care for it better and love it well. So for me, learning about the history and identity of my place where I live helps me to feel rooted and connected, and strengthens my relationship and connection with the world that I live in. And something that gets in the way of that connection is my productivity. And so I think the second way that I work to reinforce my relationship with creation is by slowing down and taking time to get outside, go for a walk. For me, I like writing poems about my experiences in nature because it helps me to feel more connected. So when I write a poem about a tree or about an experience in nature, I have to spend time in quiet stillness noticing everything about that moment. Because there is so much societal pressure to be productive, I struggle to build a connection with creation without pausing to breathe and to listen, to smell and feel the world that I live in.
So when I think about writing a life story that would allow me to connect more deeply to creation, I think making space for nature in our lives, in our worldviews and cultures, is really important. So I think for Mennonites, that connection, if we look at most of our heritage, is something that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents going back certainly didn't have this much digital exposure that we have today, and had a lot more time just on the land. I think that's really something to consider and to try to revive, because I think it can just be difficult to feel a spiritual connection to something that you don't really have much of a relationship with. So we need to rebuild our relationships with the natural world around us that sustains us.
You've probably noticed there are some common themes in what these folks have to say. We depend on creation. Literally every day is Earth Day. Respect for creation is about reciprocity, finding ways to give back instead of just taking. Paying attention to creation around us helps us to remember just how sacred it is. Of course, we don't spend our whole lives on beautiful walks in the forest, as lovely as that might be. But we can integrate creation care into the rest of our lives.